Stephen, Joseph, and others. Mhm.
Nästan lika dyrt som maten. Ja, kostar 155. Batterierna är dyra. Du tar att komma. Du sa att de skulle komma. Ja.
Aquí está Miguel. Buenos días. So we can start whenever you want.
Well, we have Miguel Alvarez Candara, who is here. Welcome. And we have David Swanson and Stephen Staples. Welcome, Stephen.
Pleasure to be here.
I've just checked with our registrar. It's so that there has been fairly equal registration for the different sessions, and now I see more and more are coming. There was 17 in the Asia session, which was a bit surprised that this is of interest outside of Europe. But we are very much grateful that you want to contribute to this discussion and see it from a global perspective. My name is Tord Björk, and I'm the coordinator of the Nordic Peace Alliance Helsinki Plus 50 Working Group. I'm also a council member of International Peace Bureau and the World Social Forum, but primarily I'm an activist in the environmental movement and Friends of the Earth since a very long time. We are very pleased to see that we can get this session, which we will record and use as a part of our webpage and the process towards Helsinki. Plus 50 will take place August the 1st in Helsinki as a stepping stone towards further activities. We see that there is a deep need of standing up for each other, not only in terms of peace and common security, but also in terms of human rights. I was very shocked about the news today that David Swanson and his family personally has been attacked and their account has been taken, and even word by Envoy. We see a growing aggression against the peace movement and many human rights defenders all over the world. And then we hope that this process can be helpful in terms of uniting the movement and strengthening the understanding of that we have to stand up together and not trust so much the governments as we have to start to trust each other. Now David Swanson has another meeting, so we will give the word to him first, and then Leo Gabriel will take over the session, and it will continue with Miguel Alvarez Candara. Unfortunately, Aida has become sick, but then Joseph Gerson, I hope he will turn up, and Stephen Staples will summarize. Hopefully we get some discussions possibility, but we will certainly end within 1.5 hours and not go on anymore. So please, David Swanson, most welcome.
Thank you. Terrific to be here, and really, really sorry that I can't stay to hear other speakers and discuss things. I hope I can see the recording. These Helsinki Accords of 1975 look to me, from the perspective of 50 years later, like part of a trend away from the insanity of mass murder and nuclear belligerence, in contrast to an opposing trend today. The war on Vietnam had given massive sadistic destruction a bad name, so bad that war promoters diagnosed society with a disease called the Vietnam Syndrome, whose only symptom was aversion to more wars. So bad that World War II became a wonderful event and the top subject of Hollywood. Opposition to wars and all sorts of other cruelty and violence and injustice and bigotry was reaching a peak in 1975, as what is often called the 60s drew to a close in the mid-70s. Opposition to wars was developing into strong opposition to the Cold War and the arms race and the maintenance of nuclear weapons. Even if what was drawn up in Helsinki was not a treaty and could be tossed aside like the Iran agreement that some dark corner of Donald Trump's fevered brain probably wishes he hadn't shredded, the Helsinki Agreement was not so easily tossed aside. A culture grew out of it, institutions grew out of it, organizations grew out of it, new laws and treaties restricting various weapons and atrocities grew out of it, and the value of neutrality and diplomacy were strengthened. When Reagan visited Helsinki in '88, on the way to meet with Gorbachev in Moscow, he felt compelled to pretend he cared about human rights and peace and all sorts of leftist hogwash. 2 years later, Bush the Elder and Gorbachev met in Helsinki. Today, such meetings would likely lead to the impeachment of a US president, who would be widely understood as being in the pay of Moscow. Times have changed. Bush the Younger's slogan of "with us or against us" is a near universal belief. Cooperation, as the word was used in Helsinki 50 years ago, is a forgotten concept. Even peace activists don't cooperate with people they disagree with. In your personal online world, you are either tainted by association with those you are not identical to, or you construct, with corporate assistance, a digital iron curtain to keep them out. The current trend is moving swiftly. In 2008, a former president of Finland received the Nobel Peace Prize for, of all strange things, negotiating peace agreements. But in 2023, Sweden and Finland received a peace prize from the Munich Security Conference for joining a military alliance and buying more weapons. As late as 2021, only 26% of people in Finland wanted to join NATO, a number that NATO boosters got up to 60% within weeks of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. The Secretary General of NATO at the time said it was precisely the insistence on NATO membership for Ukraine that had created the war. The government of Russia, knowing full well that invading Ukraine would boost NATO, declared that its only means of defending against NATO was to invade Ukraine. NATO now says we will have all-out war with Russia within a few years if we all do exactly what NATO tells us. Jumping fully into the spirit of doing whatever does not work, Finland quickly blew $10 billion on F-35 airplanes best known for crashing. While the Iron Dome is failing Israel dramatically, NATO members are searching for schools and hospitals they can defund in order to build their own domes. If new missile bases terrify the Russians too much, you can always claim, as Obama's team did for Poland and Romania, that the missiles are defensively aimed at Iran and are just a US jobs program. After all, the one bit of good news out of the US government in recent days has been its embrace of recycling. It is recycling every worn out old war lie on behalf of Israel. At worldbeyondwar.org, we have a tool that displays military bases around the globe. In the past few years, the biggest change has been in Scandinavia, where the US military has added dozens of bases across Finland, Sweden, and Norway. In Norway, they've said that US troops will have the right to go anywhere. In Germany, they've told the locals they have no right to know what their water is being poisoned with. In Australia, they've told the country it has no right to know whether the United States will bring in nuclear weapons. In Okinawa, they have told rape victims that US troops are not subject to laws. All of this is what now goes by the name freedom. You're not occupied, you're liberated. If you want to join a big upcoming global action against bases on July 14th, go to daytoclosebases.org. So here we are in a section of this event with people from the Americas. But if you want to see the future of NATO's treatment of the world, you need only look at the history of US treatment of Latin America, a history that is not over. In January, as Tor just mentioned, I visited Cuba. In June, that is in this month, a US bank closed World Beyond War's bank accounts. No consorting with the enemy. Today, I published a report about that at worldbeyondwar.org, and I have already heard from organizations in Switzerland and Sweden with similar stories about losing bank accounts for being too peaceful. In the coming days, I'm looking forward to joining in a NATO counter summit in The Hague. I am not opposed to NATO being in The Hague, of course. I just want it to be there to stand trial. And then I am headed to big peace events in Brussels and Geneva and a base protest in Ramstein. I hope that these events and those being planned for Helsinki and those rising up around the world against the wars of Israel can be part of a new trend, a trend resembling what existed 50 years ago. If a butterfly can start a hurricane, who knows what we might start if we only try. Thank you.
Thank you, David, for this strong statement, which we do need. And all the best, all the best. And let's get together in this June in several occasions and continue the Helsinki plus 50 process. So, Leo, now it's your time to take the lead of this session.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, whatever. My name is Leo Gabriel. I'm an anthropologist and a television journalist from Austria, but I'm also a sort of a hybrid person. I don't refer to sexual preferences, but that is to the fact that I have been living half of my life in Latin America, and that's why I always can make a relation between the thoughts in Europe and the thoughts in Latin America. To follow up what David just has said, I was asking myself, what is really changed since 1975? And we have to take that into consideration. Of course, there is all of that, what David Svensson said, but there was also a glimpse even in the Society of States, of nation states, a glimpse of finding a way in between the two blocks, which also was much easier than today. There are so many blocks. And the fact is that there was the unaligned movement. There were governments headed by Olof Palme, Willy Brandt, Bruno Kreisky, who have been a sort of at the forefront of a big movement around the world. Now we have to take into consideration that there is no partner in a dialogue among the nation states, among the heads of the state. And one thing which worries me a lot is that we have a real bad communication. Neither the United Nations nor the OSCE or so on have been able to reflect really the variety of positions of the civil society. So civil society has to become a main actor, which we are after, because the nation states are not trustworthy with regard to peace and many other things if we talk about security. If I just may mention, I will go right away to Latin America, but I want to show you a book. It's called More Security Without Weapons, which has been edited in Austria. And it refers to a plan of a famous physicist, Hans Tiering. He was from the generation of Einstein and others, who made a proposal how to mediate between the two big blocks. It is something like that which is necessary now in order to really get going something on the level of nation states. Still in the war of Yugoslavia and afterwards, there was a possibility, for instance, for the United Nations to apply Chapter 7 of the Charter of the United Nations with substantial peace forces in the conflict zones. Now we are working, Miguel is going to tell more about it, on the same concept, but up until now we have only met deaf ears. That is what I wanted to say at the beginning. And now for the interpreters, I would like to change language and talk into Spanish so that our colleagues from Latin America could correct me if there is something wrong. Buenas tardes. La diferencia entre aquel entonces y ahora consiste también que en aquel
Leo,
entonces...
no cambies de idioma, tenemos interpretación, habla solo en inglés. Gracias.
Ah, okay. Well, so at the time of Helsinki report, there was a big movement which gave finally way and rise to the successes of the Vietnam movement, of other movements, and so on. Now, being alone, a civil society, as I pointed out before, the important thing is that we have to produce a worldwide movement within civil society, not just ask the nation state, that doesn't help, as we have seen, but to have and in this, when I say worldwide, and that is also a big difference, at the time, the global south did not really play a major role. That's why Helsinki is up until now considered as a European thing. Now, our hope also of the movements in the north is the togetherness and solidarity of the peoples in the south, like in Latin America, in order to trigger off a politics which might be somehow different. I mean, if I look at many Latin American countries, nearly all of them, they are not on the side of the warmongers. They are responding to the claims of the people and peoples, and that's a very important factor. So we have to integrate on this level. And on another level, it is also something which very much comes from the Latin American culture. That is the togetherness between movements like the peasant movement, which is a very important movement in Latin America, and the workers' movement, which is smaller, but also very combative. And the women's movement are behind now the indigenous movement, and are very strong, making something which might be on the line of the Zapatistas. All of that is an important fact to take into the consideration, and I would like that these facts of difference, with its also conclusions, could be reflected in the document and the new declaration which we are working about. So I want to introduce our first speaker from Latin America, Miguel Alvarez. Miguel became very known at a major conflict in Mexico between the Zapatistas and the Mexican government, which was a sort of a right wing, you could say, a quite repressive government there. And he worked as a mediator between these two conflicting sides. And now, whenever there is a conflict, not only inside Mexico, but he takes up a role where he can understand each side and find a way, a proposal, which might produce a togetherness between apparently contradicting positions. And I'm very curious to talk to Miguel Álvarez now. Pero Miguel puede hablar en español, ¿verdad?
Sí, él debe hablar en español. Sí.
Ok.
Estoy dando una conferencia. Planteen lo del esquema ahí, por favor. Aunque platiquen los grupos rápido, ¿qué ajustes le harían?
Platicamos en los grupos.
Ahí rápido. Hola. I am not very fluent.
Puedes hablar en español.
Perfecto, mucho mejor.
Tranquilo, sí.
Primero, agradecer y saludar esta reunión. Estamos muy preocupados, como todas y todos ustedes. Y desde América Latina lo que pudiéramos decir es que hemos vivido varias etapas y formas de lucha y hoy nos une una valoración crítica y autocrítica de que las maneras que hemos tenido de luchar por el Estado, de ganarlo, de construir democracia y modelos, no nos ha funcionado. Y hoy hay una claridad de que no va a lograrse si no le atinamos a tres elementos, que es lo que tal vez pudiera ser hoy los énfasis latinoamericanos. Uno, que no solo estamos en una crisis de coyuntura, en una turbulencia global violenta, sino que sí estamos en el cruce de una larga e histórica crisis civilizatoria que ha cruzado todas las etapas de la humanidad y que hoy se agrava con formas de violencia. Pero toda esta problemática de la explotación del hombre a la naturaleza, del hombre al hermano, del varón a la mujer, del fuerte al débil, etcétera, pues hoy nos llegan a esta contradicción de un modelo con las más altas capacidades de producción y el mayor número de hambruna, el mayor sistema de comunicación y de tecnología, pero al mismo tiempo la mayor falta de diálogo y rompimiento de tejidos sociales, en fin. Entonces que necesitamos una visión no solo de coyuntura, necesitamos ver un proceso más de fondo. Así entendemos que esta crisis del sistema global, de la ONU, de todos los acuerdos de la Segunda Guerra Mundial, de toda la institucionalidad y derecho humanitario e internacional que se generó, pues hoy está claro que están en crisis, que no está funcionando. Y la pregunta es si se necesita de veras las guerras para impulsar procesos de transformación y de paz, o ya las señales que vemos son suficientes para empujar a un nuevo acuerdo global, mundial, internacional, que reordene las condiciones de la humanidad. Es un sueño, es una mística, pero estamos planteando que si no volvemos a alzar la mirada, la propia sobrevivencia ya no llena los clamores de los pueblos. Segunda clave, ¿quién es el sujeto de cambio? Tenemos que esperar a que los generen un acuerdo de cómo pueblos, el gran actor desde donde vendrán las condiciones del cambio sistémico que queremos. No queremos un cambio forzado por una guerra total, porque en esas cenizas del capitalismo no habrán las condiciones de justicia, esperanza, seguridad, derechos humanos. Y esta situación, y eso es lo que queríamos Leo y yo informar, la estamos viendo en sus frutos en el propio conflicto, guerra, genocidio en Palestina. Hace unos meses, todavía no cumplimos ni el año, generamos una iniciativa para una solidaridad estratégica basada en la voz y las propuestas palestinas. A la larga, lo que ha sucedido es que hemos contribuido a que se articulen las voces palestinas internamente y que puedan generar una propuesta de agenda, de estrategia, de prioridades que podamos seguir. Y esto en esta línea de que la paz y las soluciones no vendrán de afuera, sino que se construyen dentro, y por eso esta dificultad de la solidaridad para combinar cómo actuar en la escena global, pero impulsando las condiciones locales. La tercer clave que nos anima es que hacen falta actores civiles y de sociedad civil del tamaño de los retos. Y entonces estamos enfrentando una realidad de dispersión, de distribución de energías en varias agendas, mujeres, jóvenes, educación, pueblos indígenas y originarios, en fin. Y hoy el esfuerzo está en volver a articular una visión de conjunto y generar actores con mayor potencia crítica y propositiva. Y hoy está claro que hace falta un actor civil global que pese también en las condiciones coyunturales actuales para detener estas situaciones de guerra y genocidio. Y dicho esas tres cosas, por lo tanto, desde América Latina tendríamos mucha sensibilidad y claridad que urge poner de pie a nuevos actores e iniciativas y que celebrar los 50 años de Helsinki se convierte en una oportunidad histórica, no solo para hacer memoria de lo que fue, sino para rescatar el espíritu y generar una nueva iniciativa con peso en que Europa, sociedad civil, iglesias, empresas puedan converger en crear las condiciones de detener esta situación de violencia generalizada, esta brutal militarización que afecta todos los presupuestos, todas las economías, y abrir condiciones de esperanza. Déjenme terminar con una reflexión que escribió don Samuel Ruiz, el obispo de San Cristóbal, y que creo que ese es el espíritu que quisiéramos invitar y contagiar. Estos tiempos oscuros que no podemos negar y que debemos entender son, sin embargo, para nosotras y nosotros, defensores de derechos humanos y constructores de paz, son una hora de gracia, porque a pesar de lo oscuro podemos hoy ver mejor las luces, comprenderlas mejor y entender también mejor cómo fortalecerlas y cómo articularlas. Porque lo nuestro no es ser expertos en las razones de lo oscuro, sino en las razones de la luz. Porque lo nuestro tiene que ver con forjar un nuevo amanecer. Y por eso nosotras y nosotros estamos hoy llamados a ser actores de esperanza. Que ese sea el fruto de esta reunión y que abramos nuevas iniciativas y nuevos procesos. Gracias.
Yeah, thank you, Miguel. As Stephen Staples have to leave us fairly soon, I think it would be useful to bring him into the discussion, and then we'll see a common discussion can continue after that. So please welcome Stephen. It fits very well that you speak after Mexico. The two sides of the coin.
Absolutely. As we know, global leaders are in Canada today for the G7 meeting. President Trump was here yesterday, but now leaders are talking with other global leaders from other countries like South Africa, Brazil, India, what used to be known as the G20, an invention of Canada a generation ago in an effort to push beyond just the central powers to create a greater consensus globally and a greater sense of international cooperation beyond essentially the nuclear weapons states enshrined in the G7 to some degree. I read with interest the Helsinki appeal and learned quite a bit. It predates my time, of course. I'm a post-Cold War peace activist in Canada. I'm now serving as vice president of the International Peace Bureau. But I was struck by the importance and the foresight of the agreement from the 1970s and what important lessons it has for us now, 50 years later, and what a fantastic time to revisit those principles, some of which were very controversial at the time. I noted, for instance, the deference to national sovereignty and what happens within those countries has evolved a lot, I think, over the years since then, in good ways and bad. In particular, my country, the responsibility to protect doctrine, for instance, ran counter to that and was an absolute disaster in Libya, a campaign of which Canada helped lead the bombing campaign by NATO from the airbase in Italy. It was a terrible situation, and nobody talks about that anymore. But I think one of the things that really struck me as well was the equality of nation states, something that's very unique and is an idea that we've just grown up in and have come to accept, that each nation state has an equal voice as represented through the United Nations and its charter. But that hasn't always been the case. And in fact, it seems like, I'm thinking of David's commentary a little bit earlier, what's happening in the United States, moving back to power centers, spheres of influence, something from not even the 20th century, but the 19th century, moving back to that. And where I sit here, perched on the top of North America, right next to the United States, Canada more recently is being confronted with this, where in the past we sought our influence through the same kind of processes that the Helsinki Agreement put forward, was through international law, international cooperation, and that's why Canada was there, along with European partners and the United States when it was written 50 years ago. And we've always sought our influence as a middle power, not a great power, but as a middle power to help be a mediator, a voice of moderation. And I think part of that was based, again, what you see in the Helsinki document was a recognition that we should be prepared to accept the desires of other countries that we desire for ourselves. That is, everybody deserves security, and that we all have the right to defend our security and to bring our issues into the global arena to be dealt with on a serious matter and to be taken with the same sense of legitimacy. Canada right now, in this moment, 50 years later, is trying to deal with this realignment that is happening in global politics. It's most personified in the United States, but it by no means is the only place where this realignment is happening. It's shifting back to Europe, where we have been in the last 30 years through free trade agreements and whatnot with the United States. We now see that is a relationship that's not working, and we're looking for new relationships. But what's odd about it is it's not done in a sense of promoting peace and greater understanding. We are now looking to join Rearm Europe, and Canada wants a seat at that table. We are bolstering our defense spending faster than anyone had imagined. That the vision being put forward by our own government in terms of moving away from the United States towards Europe is a militarized one, is helping Europe militarize instead of helping the United States militarize. So it's missing an important agreement, or important ingredient, which is greater international cooperation towards peaceful solutions. So I think this the timing of the 50-year commemoration is very important. Of course, for Canada, we are a nation made up of people that have come from somewhere else. Now, we are occupying Indigenous lands, and there's been a terrible legacy of that. absolutely. And we have not come to a proper recognition and reconciliation of that history. But in addition, we have received waves upon waves of people that have come to Canada from Europe, from Latin America, from Southeast Asia, all fleeing from wars and conflicts and seeking peace and justice and the ability to live in their own personal freedom. And in fact, that was one of the major issues from Helsinki that seized Canada, was to help the reunification of families, for instance. And fortunately, Canadians are still in favor of immigration. We have not fallen towards the xenophobia, although we're not immune from it either. So I want to really congratulate you, Tord, in this work and commemorating this very important anniversary. And I look forward to spreading the word, to reminding people that there's a different way forward, that the antithesis of what is happening in this new polar world being presented to us from the United States and other countries is not that we take up the same militarized angle, but with different partners. That's not the solution. It is to seek justice and peace in an international sense of cooperation through strengthening institutions like the United Nations. And I hope that through our work, we will come back to that point someday, as civil society was so important in realizing the Helsinki agreements and the human rights committees that were active in all those countries. It will be up to groups like ours to create the political will and to show the way forward to our elected leaders. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve. It's a very similar situation with Canada and the Nordic countries. And it's really, as Leo started to say, that we are in a different time where we have to rely more on each other, and that it's also necessary to build these global alliances. So, Leo, you wanted to say something, please.
Yes, just what Steve talked at the end, it seemed to me very, very important as a measure of a disposition to make alliances and so on. This is the question of the migrants. It's very hard to understand. Migrants do not have a vertical organization and cannot be a force in the usual political sense. But in Latin America, and that is a difference, I think, to other continents, in Latin America, there are migrants, which, by the way, on the global scale have doubled. I remember still in the 90s, we talked about 60 million people who were forced to leave their homes. And last year is 122 millions. So how to build a structure in this structureless level and ambiance of migration? We made quite an important step in a big conference in Honduras now, where at the end we came to the conclusion there is less and less possibilities, for instance, between Mexico and the United States, for migrants to get through to the northern countries. So why don't we build an alternative and promote a culture of new settlements in the different parts where there is land and where you can form communities? Of course, that would imply support of the governments, also financial on the international level. There are needs which are at sight. Also, talking about countries of the north, it's ridiculous if we look that I have here the exact figures, that for military expense, if you have more than 90% more military expenses than you have to then you have somehow to help the problem at the root, so that people need not to leave their homes and countries. So I think there is a catalyst evolving now, at least for Central America, Mexico, in this part, but also for coming from other parts like Haiti and Afghanistan and so on, that this could be a trigger for people to get together for concrete projects, whether it be in the university or the doctors or wherever, where you can really surmount the difficulties which are one of the major symptoms of our times, and which is the cause of a political division between, let's say, extreme right and left liberals all over the world.
Thank you. I have now read the message. Joseph Gerson is on travel and cannot participate, and Aida couldn't participate as well. The good thing with these things is when we are few, we can really have a discussion. So let's continue for a while. Of course, we don't need to be using the whole time until 1930, but certainly it could be useful now when we have the chance. But Steve has to leave us fairly soon, in 10 minutes. It was really nice to hear that this xenophobia tendencies haven't grasped Canada yet. It certainly has in Sweden. Now the Social Democrats are more and more using the language of the far right or the right, very much towards the migrants, and even starting to talk about taking away the citizenship of people and so on and so on. So it's a dangerous time in these aspects. There's still sort of the common security has been kept up by the Olof Palme Center and the trade unions and social democrats in Sweden. But yesterday it was announced that all public funding is erased for the Olof Palme Center. Instead, there is money going to the xenophobian right-wing party, the Swedish Democrats, to use for their international work. And this is sort of, nobody have seen it before, sort of in our context. But certainly is that common security is well established intellectually. We know there is this process with the International Trade Union Confederation, International Peace Bureau, and the Olof Palme Center. And it links very well to what Leo Gabriel talks about, that what the trend is that we cannot wait for governments anymore. We have to do it ourselves. It was a state leader process, the Helsinki process in 1975, but and also the Olof Palme Commission 82. And now it's more in the hands of the civil society. Of course, we reach out as much as possible. We don't believe that people's movement necessarily are much better than political party. But anyway, we see this trend, and when it comes to common security, I think the concepts are very clear. It's very easy to relate to the Helsinki Accord. When it comes to the human rights issues, it's slightly different. It is explicitly mentioned in the Helsinki Accords about cultural rights, social rights. It's not only civil rights. But more or less always when it's shortened, it only talks about the civil rights and freedom of expression, etc. And that was sort of the main focus in the work afterwards. And Jury excellently told us about how the Helsinki Citizen Committee started in Ukraine. They were all sent to Gulag, but they continued the work from the Gulag, etc. The problem is now that the same Helsinki committees, some of them, not necessarily all, of course, are attacking the peace movements. This is very strong in Norway, where they have 24 employees and they use their power to do anything to stop independent peace voices. And the national television have sent a program where they are attacking the spokesperson from this new peace party. And one of the voices, strong voices in this national television is from the Helsinki Committee. So there is this very odd development from the UN Declaration, which is indivisible human rights, social and civil, until civil rights, and then suddenly not even civil rights anymore, only civil rights in Russia and Belarus, and then suddenly against civil rights in the West if you speak up for against double standards. And this is, of course, a situation where we also see that finally some of these Helsinki committees see that the problems have come home. That the authoritarian tendencies are in our own country. Civil Rights Defender, which is the Swedish Helsinki Citizen Committee, they have made a good report now about what the situation in Sweden. It's accessible also in English. And they certainly defend the climate activists, and they also defend the migrants and in general this shrinking of the space, but not the peace movement. So this is the oddities. But we see anyway a trend in that direction that, and we have to win them over. We see how Amnesty now is attacked in Russia. They are not even declared foreign agent. If you're on a foreign agent in Russia, you can still work. You just have to put this stamp on what you do. But now they are persona non grata in Russia, Amnesty. So there is these, we have to defend Amnesty, of course, in this. And they've been one of the human rights organizations that really have not used double standards. But we see some very positive signs. I just received a report from Friends of the Earth Europe meeting. And Friends of Sweden have been pushing this peace agenda many, many long years. And now suddenly they told us that they missed, there were 3 sessions. They went to 2 of them. But it was in the 3rd session where the peace appeal was very well received, and it became part of the official program for Friends of the Earth Europe. And the same thing happened at the Conservation Society in Sweden a week ago. And that is a conservation society with a chapter in every municipality in Sweden, 292 chapters. And we had mobilized a lot of people to make a motion a little bit for this peace and climate justice and so on. The board said, no, we cannot deal with that issue, right? They were not against it totally. And tactically, we just did put peace only in their answer. And it was accepted. And in the group of 40 people who discussed, actually, everybody except 2-3 people were for the motion. So, and this, what is saying also is that the peace movement, although it's growing in Sweden, it's threefold membership in the last 2 years, still people are under very pressure. But in the environmental movement, when it was discussed now at this Conservation Society, there's a lot more energy. So this bringing the movements together, that's what we can hope for with the Helsinki Plus 50 process, and with the understanding that Leo have told us that now it's in our hands. And with the message that we had in the previous session, where we have Ardo Sow from Senegal, who is an organizer of a network in 16 Western African countries who struggles for water rights, for seed rights. And it's really a grassroots movement who is now inviting us to the World Social Forum in Benin. So let's hope we can contribute to step by step in this direction. Leo.
Just to go on a little bit with this signs of hope you just mentioned, Todd, I wanted to tell two things about an area where I live in. First, in Germany, the Social Democratic Party, really the grassroots organizations, which is the Social Democratic Youth and also quite an important sector of the medium range of the Social Democratic Party. They published a week ago or a little more a so-called manifesto where they are outspoken against excuse me, I have to. Yes. Estoy en comunicación, te llamo después. And the outspoken, excuse me, I lost it now. Yes. So, of course, immediately the Minister of Defense, who is a Social Democrat, and the head of the party, Klinkbeil, accused them of being outside the realistic world. They put them against. But there was a broad alliance by the supported by the left and also the Sarah Wagenknecht left and so on. And so there is something happening. And in my country, the former president of Austria, Social Democrat Heinz Fischer, gave an interview where he said that to the Jewish community, who is always behind cutting edges of the peace movement, he said that you are promoting anti-Semitism by your attitude, because the more you get into that, the more people will hate you and the more you will say this is anti-Semitism. And to big surprise, that had quite a big echo. And I lately, since the wars began in the official media, they don't care very much about me. But from that moment on, they invited me to take part in public discussions and get my point of view and so on. So there are some things which are happening in a positive sense.
Alle?
Yeah, I just want to follow up on what Leo said just now. And I think you should never forget that the law of dialectics still works. And so we can see that whenever we have these authoritarian figures popping up, and you saw it recently in the States, that there's a huge pushback against Trump's how he has what he did with ICE and the rest of immigrants, etc. So it's many people are very full of despair at the moment. I hear all over the place, but but there is still this the possibility of agency. You can, at least in democratic countries, you have quite a wide space for reacting. So that was just it. Thank you, Leo.
I would like to continue there. It seems like the buzzword at the Friends of the Earth Europe meeting, which opened all the gates, was peace on earth and peace with earth. A very simplistic kind of notion, but that seems to catch people's heart. It's something we've been pushing for in Friends of the Earth Sweden for 10 years, and now suddenly it's been used by many others. And it sort of goes beyond the established way of doing politics, both domestic, foreign, bringing together different issues. And we need this kind of hope. And here I have a question to Ludmila Lipskaya, because I see that this kind of basic ideas to say that we now have to work for peace on earth and peace with earth. These are so basic things that I hope this Helsinki plus 50 process can be a sort of meeting ground for doing it. And I'm specifically involved in these eco-villages. And as far as I know, the eco-village movement in Russia is the biggest on earth. And that there's a lot of eco-villages in Ukraine as well. And recently, Via Campesina in Sweden had a conference with the experiences from the war on the countryside in Ukraine, where it was clearly that when Russia bombed the electricity power plant, the whole agro industry went into total crisis. They had to kill 5 million chickens and so on. And what saves the country are the small farmers. They can take care of the people and put them, give them work, etc., like the internal displaced persons and so on. And these kind of immediate work in the local communities, which we see also in Sweden, plant potatoes, we say. And suddenly we can do that in 150 out of 292 municipalities. We need these kind of base, and that's where I also connect to the ideas of migration ideas in Central America. We have to show the agency that people in common can do things. So I was very interested in, you had this idea to get contact between the Russians and Ukrainians. I hope you're still there. Oh, but Yuri, maybe you have some comment on this perspective. People to people contact, Russia, Ukraine, westward and south.
I think it is a wonderful idea to have a dialogue between people, and dialogue based on fairness, of course, with no justification of deadly attacks on Ukrainian cities from Russian army. Human rights, because we need to discuss how we could build more democratic governments both here in Ukraine and in Russia, where all human rights, starting from the right refuse to kill, will be respected. I hope that there could be millions of people in Russia refusing to participate in Putin's war. And it could end it like the Vietnam War was ended because of mass refusal to kill. Also, I noted your mention of amnesty, and amnesty is very good on values, but sometimes people on the ground make questionable statements. I wrote in chat, sometimes amnesty is very good, and I'm grateful to them for reporting my case in report on Ukraine 2023 regarding problems with freedom of speech in Ukraine, persecution for advocacy of peace and conscientious objection. But unfortunately, currently, Amnesty also apparently is helping Ukrainian government and army to downplay problems with tortures and prisoners of conscience in Ukraine. There was even interview on Ukrainian human rights portal from Amnesty researcher saying there is no problems, and it is not the case because, for example, United Nations Committee Against Torture this year in May issued report. It recognized efforts of Ukrainian government to do something and stop bad tendencies, but also expresses serious concerns regarding tortures, alleged tortures of Russian prisoners of war, related alleged tortures of conscientious objectors by military recruiters, and so on. And it is especially shameful that Ukrainian director of Amnesty on France 24 TV said it is okay and fine to wage war, even to wage war aggressively if you follow the rules of war, international humanitarian law. Well, there is laws restraining cruelty in war, but in no way it could justify waging war itself, because war is prohibited by United Nations Charter, because United Nations Charter clearly states you need always to seek peaceful solutions to all conflicts. And United Nations is currently under many attacks from warmongers, and we need to stand for to save and to develop, to reform, to make more democratic and transparent and effective United Nations. But any attacks on United Nations, any attacks on peaceful resolution of conflicts from warmongers are intolerable, full of disinformation, and we need to stand up to this disinformation regarding our best hope for nonviolent world governance, the United Nations.
Thank you, Yuri. Then Ludmila, did you hear my question before?
If you don't mind repeating here, because I was about to pop out, but I'm able to complete it.
The thing is that we in Sweden have this catchword, peace on earth and peace with earth. And we do a lot of cooperation with the so-called transition movement. For instance, when there was this COVID crisis, people started to understand we have no contingency. If really a crisis comes, we will not survive. So there was a call for planting potatoes, and it took place in the majority of the municipalities. And this movement is also addressing peace. And they say, well, they will call us Putinists. We don't care. We are only focusing on doing some good practical things, and peace is not necessarily bad, sort of. So, and they are much stronger than the peace movement and the environmental movement. They are doing practical things. And we also know that the eco-village movement in Russia is very, very big. And also in Ukraine, and that the countryside has been very important now during the war in Ukraine, because when the electric grid is bombed, the agri-industry is falling apart. They had to kill 5 million chicken here at one occasion. Then the small farmers are the ones who produce food, but they also give shelter to the internally displaced persons and give them job, etc. This level of cooperation for some very general thing like peace on earth and peace with earth, and then communicate some messages. That I wonder, because you were especially interested in this direct contact between people in Russia and Ukraine.
Thank you. Yeah, so I think my contribution would be the way we work with women's groups and mostly women community leaders and the heads of NGOs in both countries, including women from the occupied territories, so to speak. And I believe, I mean, as you said, practical project is a key, and it's where the potential, I would say word cooperation, although if you talk to Russians and Ukrainians these days, the word cooperation is far too soon to use. Even the word dialogue is a bit too premature. And I'm talking about people who are still in those countries, not those who left, because they are in safety, relatively. But those who are there, what we found that even we have a dialogue and we support the dialogue. So this has to happen under certain rules of safety for women who participate, because until recently, peace was not allowed word in Ukrainian context, but the war was not allowed word in the Russian context. So talking about war and peace would have been a big challenge. But but this is the foundation of the long-lasting peace, because it has to be. I mean, there are lots of this military conflict as it happened through the tension between two countries. I'm not talking about the NATO role and the international kind of warmongering kind of stimulation of this war, but between the countries, it was very based on the otherness, alienation, separation, the propaganda of hatred, etc. So to counteract that, we need to find a way to start again the dialogue, and the dialogue and some sort of interaction between the civil societies then would be a foundation for the long-lasting peace. Of course, we need to think about what it can result into, some practical demands on the humanitarian issues, including ecological, and for Russian-Ukrainian conflict, the big thing would be family reunification, because families do not speak, not just for ideological reasons, but because it's very unwelcomed by the political agenda in both countries. So to change the dynamic from the very grassroots, from the very kind of unit of the family at the human level, that's, I believe, the foundation. But then practical projects, whether it's ecological or a certain infrastructure, that could be also a platform for the communities and administrations, more kind of at the local level, to work together and to do something together, because they had to. In some situations, they just had to, because certain areas like occupied territories, they still under kind of in between jurisdictions. So yeah, so again, just to maybe sum up, so I believe the dialogue at the civil society level, and women can lead, because they at the moment leading the community's work and the healing work and the humanitarian work and the not just human rights, but psychosocial work in the communities. So this work then elevated to the level of both decision makers and also the participants in the peace negotiations, because we're also working on women inclusion in the peace process. At the moment, it is very secret, very elite, behind a closed door. So how we can open it up to the civil society, which is again a massive challenge in the very authoritarian context. But inevitably, the reviewing the European security agreement will be part of the peace process between Russia and Ukraine, because Europe is involved. European context is a context of this Russian-Ukrainian war, and there we believe the civil society should be involved, and we're trying to do it through the role of women, because we have international tools, of course 1325 and other important resolutions which can kind of support women involvement one way or the other.
Thank you. And this family reunion issues were really central 75. And I'm a strong believer in that we should not neglect what can be seen as very narrow issues and so on. On the contrary, that is what may open gates. So thank you for this. And in general, we have said that this whole migration issue is rather new, though, compared to 75. And this is where we have to have a certain focus on, which includes then the diaspora as well. We can see now that the diaspora in both Ukrainian and Russian and Belarusian have problems in the West in a way which is really worrisome. Where of course also the question of consciousness objective comes up and so on. Leo.
In this context, I have a question to Ludmila and also to Yuri. What you are describing is a recent phenomenon with regard to, let's say, 2 years ago. Is this something which you can feel in the population taking the security measures and everything, but that there is an agreement, a tacit agreement, perhaps, or is it a new phenomenon, or is it has it always been there? Only we didn't think about it.
If you, I don't know, Yuri, do you want to? I mean, I can just give my contribution to that. I mean, first of all, what Tord also said, because the family reunification is part of that also reconciliation process, which will be kind of a part of peace process eventually. And again, we should prepare for it, and then the reconciliation process is first of all within the countries, within Ukraine, within Russia. The social fabric is very disrupted. And then there are massive amount of Ukrainian migrants outside of Ukraine and of Russian people who left Russia of different kinds. Then, of course, it's between the countries. Russia and Ukraine actually damage their relationship to the point then we've got the war. But as you as mentioned, also it's between Russia and the rest and the West, Russia and Europe, and in the eyes of the European people, like now the whole country, not only those who made a decision about this war, but almost every Russian is an enemy, is someone who is alienated, someone who needs to be punished. Even people who are in the opposition, they still kind of have lots of issues in the West. And in terms of the tension, I mean, this tension existed, and particularly on the Western Ukraine side. But again, it's been almost like cultivated and exploited with propaganda to bring the tension to the boiling point, to the bifurcation point when it's erupted. And since we saw 2014, that was a moment where this point of tension again was, I believe, exploited, and the military action started. And I wouldn't go into complication of what happened then, but it's just escalated because that was also almost like political will to allow it to escalate. So therefore, the civil society did some efforts and did what they could, But clearly, this is a different stage when everyone is just thinking, how can we stop it and not allow it to repeat again? Because if the reconciliation hasn't happened, and there are so many elements of it, then the history shows that the war can kind of reignite. And again, history shows usually at the much more severe stage, in much more intense ways. So we need to already foresee this and start the work to heal the fabric of relationship at every level, as you mentioned. It's with Europe as well. So the voice of people could be heard by the politicians, because everyone believes that the continuing the war is the best option for Ukraine right now and for Europe. And that's why we're talking the alternative views here.
Thank you. And I see Yuri says that there is this global dialogue platform, Dialogue 8. I think what Ludmila said here is very essential, the practical part of these things. Because I think that there is a limit to these kind of Zoom meetings, but also to the whole official way of doing politics. This to live it and do things and then communicate with each other when you do things. I think it's really essential. So thank you very much, Ludmila. Karin, take the word, please.
Well, thank you for this all the day, Ludmila made me step forward to put two questions I have. The first one is what you know about the Donbas region. What do the people in that region feel now? Are they just as hostile to Russian and Russians as the rest of Ukraine because of the war? Or that was one question. And the other one is how do these people who listen to the war propaganda, of course, it's like that, where you get more hostility through wars. But how do they think that keeping the war, how will it be able to end if they get more and more weapons? Well, that are my two questions.
Probably Yuri would be the one to respond on behalf of Ukraine and Donbass. But saying this, I've just spent time in training with women from Donbass region, and we had lots of in-depth conversations. And well, I mean, one thing I have to say from the start, that both in Russia and Ukraine, both not just civil society and the political power are very polarized. So it's not just one view. I think one thing now, maybe I would say overwhelming majority in both countries, they want the war to end. The political views could be different, but they want the war to end. So that's for sure. And in Donbass region, I mean, some of them it's historically more pro-Russian part. It's the Russian language was there. I actually was brought up in Crimea and lived there for some time. So again, when it was part of Ukraine, all the papers were in Russian, the language was Russian. So and my mom was Ukrainian, but she also wanted Crimea be part of Russia because of some historical connections. It was just felt natural. And I guess in Donbass, there are some people who really suffer. Lots of people, some people left who were much more pro-Ukrainian and didn't want Donbass be part of Russia. But some people also saw how the Ukrainian government behaved in the early days in 2014, 15, and they were not happy with that they literally saw the deaths through the military action of their own army. And so I think the consensus said that everyone wants the war to end because it's been too much for humans to bear. and they still bear the war, the bombing, the suffering, that still happens. So I don't know whether I answered all the question. I also feel that it's probably this session is not about Russia and Ukraine, and I shouldn't take so much time, but and it's a very big conversation. So maybe we can have a conversation about it separately, which I'm very happy to be part of.
It's time to wind up, and I think Miguel could sense some similarity in spite of that there is so much differences. I think we give the last American in this, the last word we give to Miguel. See what you say.
Bueno, me ha parecido una reunión muy enriquecedora, muy madura. El hecho de estar de varias regiones y visiones me parece que es muy sólida. Y este reto que estamos platicando de qué iniciativa generar, me parece que ese es el camino. Tanto para todo este tema central y fundamental de Ucrania y Rusia, como para todos los demás. Así que yo lo sugeriría es que este espacio se vuelva a reunir, que no sé si con el mismo formato de 3 bloques o con uno solo, pero recoger de todo lo que se haya dicho, qué ideas de propuestas e iniciativas hay, y que este evento ya genere un proceso. Así que yo diría bienvenidas las ideas de propuesta, y no sé si pedirle a Tord que puedan hacer una síntesis de las ideas principales de la reunión, que nos los manden y hacemos una próxima reunión para tratar de aterrizar alguna iniciativa.
Thank you, Miguel, and everybody else. And now, exactly on time, we will finish this last session. And I'm very much appreciating that we could have it, because we need to go outside of Europe. We need to address Asia and Latin America and North America. Thank you very much. And let's hope we can continue the process. We will continue the process online and in Helsinki in the end of July and on the 1st of August. Goodbye, everybody, and thanks to the interpreters. Thank you very much for that effort.